Hi guys, welcome back to Kamaudacity. Now, I have been doing a series of videos about memory lane, my awesome childhood, right? And I did 3 prior to this, and in the last one I was saying, you know, I think I might be doing more because knowing me, how nostalgic I am, more things are gonna flood into my head, and I don't think 3 videos would have been enough. So I would have been deceiving myself if I thought 3 videos would have been enough to cover my awesome childhood. So here we are with video number 4. Alright, so I'm gonna run down some more interesting things about my childhood, and don't be surprised if you hear that there's a video number 5, 6, 7, 102. Don't be surprised, because I'm such a sentimental person, I'm such a nostalgic person, always been. And if I could get the chance to go back and relive some of those days, I certainly would embrace that opportunity. And you know, there's a sad part to it too, because many of these persons who you grew up with and you had all these memories with, many of them are no longer here. Some you know, got to old age and passed on, and some passed on quite young, actually as children or very young adults, and that part of it is sad, because you know, you remember growing up and they had you all had plans, you all had visions for the future, and some just drop out, you know, drop out too soon. So we have the memories. So we're gonna go down memory lane again. So the first thing I want to talk about in this video, the shops, the corner shops. They were a very crucial part of our growing up. You know, every 10 cents we got, we'd run to the corner shop. Run to the corner shop. Serve. You'd call out, serve, serve. And we had, back those days, we had, you know, the 10 cent bulla, 10 cent or $1 could get you so much. $1 could get you so much. Those days. When I said those days, I'm not that old. I'm not that old, but still, you know, back in those days, $1 could get you a good amount of stuff. And the least little 10 cents you got, you're gone to the shop. No barefooted and dirty and all of that. No bag, nothing. You just run to the shop. As well as, you know, adults will send you out, send you to the shop, whether it's your parents or just, you know, sometimes you'd have some older guys hanging out in the yard, because my grandfather had built a shed, and it was harboring his friends, whether to play dominoes or listen to cricket or horse racing, or just sit and just easy. And so they would send you to the shop, send you to go buy a cigarette. They weren't supposed to, but they would. And so you had these, you know, little shops about the place. I know down where I live in Pecan Valley, our shop was Miss Lentine's shop. That was the shop. And there was another little shop after a while. I think his name was Gerald or something like that. But he didn't, for some reason, he didn't stay long. But he sold some really nice sweets. And it was right across from my house, right? Up on the main, so you would have the shop we call Big Shop. You know, country people just have these weird names for things. Big shop, little shop, just like we say big yard and little yard. You'd have Mass V shop. Then of course you'd have the supermarket, which was a later addition to the community. And you know, the fancier items you would get there, the fancier experience. Even though it was, you know, by the standards of town, it was just a small little supermarket. But for us, I know for me, when the supermarket just came, it was a grand event for me, right? Sometimes, well, many times, the persons in the community. These shops, you know, they were really a lifeline, and many persons in the community, they had a credit thing going on because, you know, many of these persons were poor, lived from hand to mouth, and so the shops would offer credit. You know, some of them wear out the credit, and after a while they couldn't get any more credit because of bad payment. But some of these shops really helped out. And when we were going through certain crises, that the country was going through certain crises, what these shops used to do is they had this thing where they said that they have to marry certain goods. So like if certain things weren't selling and other things were selling, they would marry them together. So if you're buying this, you have to buy one of that. Yeah, or the shops did that. If they found that certain things weren't going. I'm pretty sure it was illegal, or at least frowned upon, but they did it. Alright, now church families. So you had, you know, in every little community, every village, you would have these persons who at least put on an air, you know, of being upstanding, and, you know, they would be off to church every Sunday, well dressed, and you would watch them going up, you know, off to church. And of course their children didn't mix with us, the urchins. We were the barefooted urchins running about the place. Their children didn't mix with us, and so it was an event. Every Sunday you'd see them off the hill, and they would spend the whole day at church, right? These church families, giving that air of respectability. I'm not saying they weren't worthy of respect, but they were giving that air. And my family was not no church family. Nobody in my family went to church religiously. I think one of my aunts went through a phase of going to youth fellowship. For a phase of going to youth fellowship. I think she actually was baptized. You know, one of my aunts. She was the only one who was inclined towards any church going. I hear that my grandfather was a deacon at one point in his younger days. But when I came along, my granddad had long given up that life. My grandfather had long given up whatever church affiliation he had in his younger days, according to my grandmother. I don't know about it, and I didn't see any trace of it left. Alright, now the squabbles, you know, you'll be there and you hear fight, fight, fight. Somebody, and these people would take their fights out into the center of the. I lived in Pican Valley, right? And sometimes when they had fights, they would take it to the center of the place, so everybody had to see the fight. And sometimes they would rip each other's clothes off, throw stones, and you'd be there, you know, watching and trying to dodge the stones, trying not to get hit. But everybody would be there, some cheering them on, some trying to part them. But it would be an all-out, fist-to-fist, stone-throwing kind of thing. And it added some excitement to our village life. You know, these fights, whether it's between female and female, male and male, or sometimes male-female. These fights added some texture to our lives. I mean, looking back now, you know that, hey, this was domestic violence. This was, you know, should not have been happening. But as a child, this was exciting. This was exciting to you. You know, so yeah, those fights. Then now, the crushes. As a child, you know, growing up, you would have crushes on other children, or even movie stars, singers. You know, you saw them on TV. I was in love with Russell Tompkins Jr. of the Stylistics. nobody could tell me I was going to marry him. I seriously believed for like 3 years, for like from about 12, 13, 14, I honestly, seriously believed I was going to marry this guy. And I didn't even, at one point, I didn't even know what he looked like. I just knew I loved his voice. Right? And then, you know, the children in your class, you would definitely have crushes, but, you know, very innocent. We didn't get past, you know, just looking, maybe holding hands, smiling, blushing, you know, that kind of thing. Yes, and that was a good experience. That was a good experience. One thing though, I must say, you know, social media is a thing that, the benefits of social media is you get to link up with persons from your past, persons you went to school with, persons you grew up with, and then, you know, it's really good to see how they have blossomed, to see how they have, you know, taken charge of their lives, and you remember how they were as children and how you were and the plans they had. And I just love to see, for example, my classmates, those girls, now with their families, their careers, and they're doing their thing. I love to see that. And some of the men, you know, looking back, and I'm saying, damn, when these guys were 9, 10, 11, they were ugly. They didn't have anything going for them. Guys, when you were 10, 11, 12, you had nothing going for you. Go back and look at your school, go back and look at your school photos, your portrait pictures. You had nothing going for you at 10, 11, 12. But I must say, I've been checking out some of your profile pics on social media. I must say your good looks have caught up with you. Yes, indeed. Some of you looking quite nice, I must say. And when I remember how you used to look when you were in grade 5 and 6, well, I must say life has been good to you. Alright, so let's talk about sex, right? As children, you know, you didn't know what this thing was. Well, you kind of had a vague idea. You'd hear things, and the older ones, you know, would mention things, but you didn't really know what it was. And the most was like you see two dogs mating, and you would, what we call it was we said the dogs itch. They itch and they can't pull out. You know, when sometimes the dogs mating, it's hard for the male to come out. That's as much as of sex as we were exposed to. But let me tell you, and even now looking back, I'm saying a lot of children were abused. We weren't aware of it. For some of us, the most we had in terms of abuse, and it was, I'm not downplaying this by any means, you know, this should not have happened either, but we, you know, if you had older men like visiting or around older men, they would touch you up, or they would call to you, psst, you know, that kind of thing, and say little things. But you had girls who were seriously sexually abused, and we didn't know. Just looking back and putting the pieces together, you know, you'd realize, hey, this child was going through some really traumatic things, and was dealing with it in a way that this child will be playing with you, playing dolly house with you, going to school with you, and later you realize her dad was abusing her, or her mom had been abused. Her granddad was her dad, that kind of thing. And then you look back and say, but this child was going through so much and found a way to still laugh, to still play. And it just makes you wonder now, looking at, you know, children in your life now and saying, you don't really know sometimes, because people deal with abuse in so many different ways. But we were all exposed to it. Like I said, some of us, the men around us would touch you and make little remarks, and you know, we all went through it in one shape or form. And it's wrong. And some of these families were protecting these men, harboring them, shielding them, and telling the girls, oh, deal with it. I had to deal with it. That's what they're saying. That's what some of the mothers and grandmas and aunties are saying to these little girls. I had to deal with it, so you just deal with it. That's what they're saying to them. It's just a thing, and as women, it's part of what we have to deal with. They were telling these girls, and I'm sure still have some telling these girls. So we have to look out for the children, you know, and make sure that they understand what sex is about. You had, you know, because of the level of poverty and so on, in many cases, some of these children were sleeping on the same beds with their parents. And so, for many of us, we were pretty much innocent, didn't know. But some were not, because they were exposed to it, right on the bed, and your parents mating, having sex, and you're there sleeping on the bed. That was a situation with many of the children. And you know, we would hear of like your older brothers, your uncles, they would go to this place, and you would hear, oh, over there they show blue movies. That's what they call porn at that time. Films with porn in the blue movies. And it was this building that was just shielded off, like this clandestine place. You know, and as a child you'd be wondering, what the hell is blue movie? You know, but that's how exposed we were. But sadly to say, many other children were far more exposed and suffered abuse at the hands of the adults in their lives. You know, so that's a sad part of it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses. We have them in every generation. Every generation. So when I was growing up, you know, most persons would try to avoid them and run and hide, or tell them all kind of story why they can't talk. I sought them out. I lay waited them, because I wanted to argue with them. About what? Because as far as I was concerned, they were saying nonsense. And the stories in the Bible just didn't make sense to me, and I wanted to argue it out. And these men, they were mostly men, they would come around and they would entertain me. They would entertain my questions, and we would argue. I distinctly remember that. Alright, so the country sounds. I'm going through this list, right guys? There's a lot of memories. So they're not in any particular order. They just flooded, and I made a list and I'm going through them. So the country sounds. Well, I'm so happy I grew up in the country. You would wake up to the sound of the rooster crowing. You know, every now and then you would hear the woodpecker out. I haven't heard a woodpecker in like decades. Decades. I've not heard a woodpecker. You would hear the crickets at night. You would hear the goats, you know,